They mocked a black waitress's scars until a veteran saw her tattoo. They laughed at the black waitress with scars on her face. But they didn't know. She was a war hero, a mother, and a storm wrapped in silence. They thought they were mocking a nobody. What they were really doing was waking up a black woman with receipts, rage, and a plan. This isn't just a story of revenge. It's the rise of a black woman they should have never crossed. Black waitress mocked for her scars, but she carries a hidden past. The cheap fluorescent lights of Ray's diner flickered like tired eyes refusing to sleep. Plates clattered, silverware sang its quiet chorus, and conversations hummed low, except at one table near the window. That table always broke the peace every Tuesday at noon, when men in tailored suits filled the booth with cigars, cruelty, and the sound of their own entitlement. Davidson sat at the center of it all, like a rotting core in a bright red apple. His laughter sliced through the air as he slammed his hand on the table and shouted loud enough for everyone to hear. Well, looks like Freddy Krueger came to work today. The room froze for half a breath. A coffee pot trembled slightly in the hands of Kesha Johnson as she walked toward their table. But her grip was firm, her posture straight. The scars on her fingers caught the harsh light, webbed and twisted like old battle lines that never healed. They crept past her knuckles and disappeared under the crisp white sleeves of her uniform. "Hey, monster," Davidson smirked, elbowing his accountant. "Be careful not to spill it with those burnt hands." Their laughter howled through the diner, bouncing off walls, turning heads. But Kesha didn't flinch. She had heard worse. She had endured worse, and not just from men like Davidson. Some wounds were earned under a burning foreign sun, where sand mixed with blood and prayers. Kesha was 34, a mother, a veteran, a woman who had walked through war zones carrying wounded men heavier than herself while mortars sang death overhead. Now she poured coffee for men who couldn't stomach a woman with scars, but who had no trouble stomaching their own cowardice. "I bet it was a fire in the ghetto," Brett, the accountant, whispered, loud enough to land like a slap. "Or maybe she was trying to cook crack and blew it up," Davidson added with a cackle. "Or maybe," he leaned forward, "her boyfriend did it. You know how it is with them." Kesha stopped by their table, the pot still in her hands. Her eyes were calm, her movements precise. She poured each cup with surgical care, the kind you learn not in culinary school, but in field hospitals drenched in blood and dust. "Anything else, gentlemen?" she asked, voice smooth as a still lake. Davidson frowned. That wasn't the reaction he was aiming for. He leaned in, eyes narrowed, lips twisted in a mock concern. "Yeah, an explanation," he said. "Tell us how you got that. Was it an accident, or did someone teach you a lesson?" For a moment, just a blink, something moved in Kesha's eyes. It wasn't fear. It wasn't shame. It was something colder, something sharper. The look of someone who had faced death and come back, not softer but steel-forged. "Work," she said flatly, then turned. "What kind of work leaves someone like that?" Brett asked with a sneer. "Nightclub security, prostitute." Kesha stopped mid-step and turned her head slowly. "Careful," she said softly. That one word shifted the air. It carried no threat, but its weight made the table go quiet. Davidson glanced at his friends. He laughed, but there was hesitation now. "Oh, look," he said, his voice slightly higher. "Monster S trying to scare us." But Kesha wasn't trying to scare anyone. She was calculating. That calm wasn't submission. It was the discipline of someone who had been trained to stay still under sniper fire. Every name, every company, every joke, every slip of information they dropped on these Tuesday lunches, she remembered it all. From across the room, James Wright stirred in his seat. He had only stopped at Ray's for coffee, a pit stop on his cross-country drive. But now his hand hovered over the cup, His eyes were fixed on Kesha. There was something familiar in the way she stood, in how she absorbed humiliation with such unnatural calm. Like watching a soldier under fire. The stillness, the alertness, the quiet fury behind the eyes. Davidson wasn't done. Work, he repeated. You call this work? You serve coffee, you clean tables. Doesn't seem like high-risk stuff to me. Brett chuckled, encouraged again. Maybe she worked a barbecue pit and leaned in too close. Or dry cleaners, chemicals, right? You know, jobs for people like her. Kesha's hand froze mid-wipe on the table next to them. People like me, she echoed, turning to face them. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't scowl. She just stared, and her tone held something new, an edge of ice in the calm. Davidson laughed nervously. Yeah, you know, manual labor, stuff that doesn't need, you know, too much thinking. And then it happened. Kesha bent down to pick up a napkin. Her sleeve shifted. James saw it, just a sliver. A few faded letters on a tattoo half hidden. But to anyone who had served, it was unmistakable. The script, the placement, it screamed military. He leaned forward, his heart beating just a little faster. Kesha straightened, brushing her sleeve down. Manual labor, she murmured. That's an interesting way to describe carrying wounded soldiers 3 miles under enemy fire. Davidson blinked, not catching it. What did you say? Nothing, Kesha replied. Do you want the check, or do you plan on standing here all day talking about my skin? The shift in her tone was enough to throw him off. He stepped back instinctively, like some part of him realized she was not the prey. Listen here, girl, he said, voice rising. You will show us some respect. We're paying customers, and you're just an employee, Kesha cut in. Calm, full eye contact, James sat up straighter. The way she squared her shoulders, the way her fingers spread open at her sides, it was muscle memory. She wasn't just standing up for herself. She was preparing, assessing threats. Ready to respond, Davidson flinched but tried to recover. Employees should know their place. My place, she said slowly, tasting the words. You're right, I should know my place. The problem is you have no idea what my real place is. Silence spread across the diner like a fog. Utensils stilled. Chews paused mid-bite. Eyes shifted. Behind the counter, Tony, the manager, peeked out. He had known Kesha for years, always steady, always polite, always professional. But now something was different. There was tension in the air, like static before a storm. You know what? Davidson muttered. I bet you didn't even finish high school. I bet those scars are from some gang fight. People like you, always in trouble. James saw it, a subtle shift in Kesha's face, an internal decision. The moment when restraint gets replaced with intention. Gang fight, Kesha said, lips curled in a tight, humorless smile. That's always the assumption, isn't it? Never noble, never honorable, just trash stories for trash minds. Davidson scoffed. Noble, look at you. You work in a roadside joint. What's noble about that? Kesha took a slow step forward. When you've seen men scream their last breath, when you've carried bodies that used to breathe and joke and cry, you stop measuring nobility by uniforms or paychecks. She leaned in, her voice a whisper he could feel more than hear. You judge by what you see. I judge by what I know people do when no one's watching. Davidson blinked. Are you threatening me? Kesha stood straight again. No, just making sure you understand that sometimes the most invisible person in the room is the most dangerous one. James didn't blink. He knew now. She wasn't hiding her pain. She was loading it, quietly, carefully, like a weapon only to be drawn when the moment demanded it. And that moment was coming. Scarred waitress silently records racist execs. Veteran begins to suspect. Outside, the Texas sun beat down hard on the blacktop. Inside Ray's diner, the air buzzed with the soft hum of the ceiling fan and the clink of cutlery, but that piece was thin, a cheap curtain barely hiding the thick tension draped over table 7. Kesha moved through the narrow aisle between booths, white apron tied tight, coffee pot warm in her hand. Every step was precise, her expression unreadable. Her skin, marked by deep burn scars, drew second glances from newcomers, but most of the regulars had long learned to mind their own business. At least in silence. Behind the counter, Dante, the line cook, leaned slightly to the left, peeking through the window above the grill. "They at it again?" he asked under his breath. Maria, the prep cook, didn't answer. She just sighed, cutting tomatoes with rhythmic, anxious chops. Both were black. Both had seen what happened every Tuesday. Both had felt their own throats tighten more than once when Davidson's voice got loud. But they never said anything. The unspoken rule in the back was simple. Don't lose your job trying to defend someone who's already figured out how to survive. Kesha had that look, the look of someone who had grown armor over every nerve ending. She didn't cry. Didn't flinch, she just absorbed it. But that didn't mean she didn't feel it. As she moved from one table to the next, her mind was a locked vault, a silent recording device cataloging everything. Davidson's voice echoed again. "Think she even knows what conditioner is?" Laughter, maybe she fried her hair too, matches the arms. Louder laughter. Kesha didn't glance their way. She moved to the next booth, poured coffee, nodded to a family of 4. Her hands never shook. Her eyes never blinked longer than necessary. But inside, she wasn't numb. Inside, she was categorizing. Every Tuesday they came, same seats, same orders. Davidson always joked that routine made powerful men efficient. What he didn't know was that routine made careless men predictable. Kesha had learned every name. Davidson, Brett, Todd, Shane. She had memorized their habits. Davidson ordered black coffee with 1 sugar, stirred exactly 3 times. Brett liked his pancakes dry with butter on the side. Todd tipped in cash, but only if no one was watching. Shane flirted with waitresses but was married. He'd mentioned his wife 3 weeks ago by accident while bragging about a corporate dinner. They talked like no one was listening, but Kesha listened to everything. And across the diner, someone else was watching. James Wright sat in a booth by the wall, his cup of coffee barely touched. The steam had thinned, but he didn't move. His eyes tracked Kesha like radar, subtle but steady. He watched the way she navigated around each insult with careful precision. Watched how she cleaned a table without ever turning her back to Davidson. Watched how her eyes scanned corners the way soldiers do, counting exits, clocking obstacles. There was a calm to her, a practiced silence. It triggered something deep in James's memory, a place he hadn't visited in years. He had seen that calm before, not in diners, in war zones. He sat up straighter, blinking slowly, focusing not on her face this time, but on her body language. Shoulders squared, back straight, left hand always free. Dominant side turned away from threats. That wasn't a waitress's posture, that was tactical. At table 7, Davidson was laughing again. "Come on, Kesha," he called out, dragging her name like something sticky on his tongue. "You're quiet today. No stories, no little updates. Don't be shy, we're friends, right?" She turned and walked toward them. Her smile was slight, polite, professionally distant. She poured the coffee. "Anything else?" she asked. Brett leaned back, grinning. "You ever consider modeling? Might be a good scare campaign for fire safety awareness." Kesha didn't respond, but James saw her eyes move to Brett's wedding ring. His loose tie, the fraying edge of his cuffs. He saw it. Kesha wasn't offended. She was observing. Davidson chuckled, waving his phone toward her. "Bet if I filmed you and played it back in slow motion, your scars would look like melted wax." The words hung in the air, heavy and slow. Maria dropped a metal bowl in the kitchen. Dante swore under his breath. James felt his fingers tighten around his coffee mug. And Kesha? She stood there, eyes meeting Davidson's like they were equals on a battlefield. She leaned forward slightly to collect the bill, and that's when it happened. Her sleeve shifted just an inch, just long enough. James's breath caught, there on her forearm, partially hidden by faded fabric and skin, a tattoo. He couldn't read the whole thing, but what he saw was enough. A curved edge, a series of numbers, a stylized arrow, military, specifically Army medics. He had served with enough trauma specialists to know the ink when he saw it. It was old, worn. But real, he stared, and everything about her clicked into place. The calm, the posture, the restraint, the scars. She hadn't just survived something. She de-earned those marks in a place where people died every day. She was one of them. Davidson didn't know. Neither did Brett or Todd or Shane. They thought she was just another invisible worker, a woman with skin they could mock, a body they could laugh at, a soul they could trample. James took a slow sip of coffee and said nothing. Not yet, but he watched her walk away with that same soldier's grace, the kind that doesn't need applause or acknowledgement to feel its own strength. Back behind the counter, Maria finally spoke. They keep this up every week. One day she's gonna snap. Dante shook his head. No, she's not gonna snap. She's gonna do something worse. Like what? Like stay calm, wait, watch, and then end them without ever raising her voice. Maria looked at him. You think she's that cold? No, Dante replied. I think she's that smart. Out on the floor, Kesha wiped down another table. Her face was expressionless, but her mind was alive, piecing together every insult, every name, every detail. She overheard Davidson talk about contracts before, about how to clean up offices that were getting too diverse, about firing people without leaving fingerprints. She remembered everything, and now someone else did too. James finished his coffee and quietly flagged down another server. Excuse me, he said, nodding toward the woman in the white apron. That waitress, the one with the scars, what's her name? The server blinked. Kesha. James nodded slowly. Kesha, he repeated to himself. He looked at the sleeve, at the tattoo, at the woman. And then he looked at Davidson. A smirk returned to the executive's face as he laughed at some internal joke, completely unaware of the tide shifting beneath his feet. James whispered under his breath, they don't even know who they're messing with. And Kesha, silent, scarred, steady, walked across the diner floor with the quiet weight of a storm not yet unleashed. Tattoo reveals Black Waitress is a war hero, but no one knew. The hiss of the coffee machine behind the counter couldn't drown out the sound of Davidson's voice, now rising again with fresh insult. But Kesha didn't flinch. She moved like she always had, steady, quiet, invisible by design. But to James Wright, nothing about her felt invisible anymore. He had seen it. The tattoo, a faded edge tucked beneath fabric and time. The kind of ink you don't get on a whim, the kind that binds you to something greater than yourself. 1st Infantry Division, Big Red 1. James hadn't heard that name in years. But it stayed etched in him, like the sand of Kandahar still embedded in the seams of his boots long after he came home. He watched her, calculating how to approach. You don't just walk up to someone like Kesha and drop the word veteran. No, you ease into it, gently, respectfully, like you're approaching a fellow soldier in a battlefield full of civilians who will never understand. Kesha passed his table again, moving briskly toward the back with a fresh tray. He raised his hand slightly, not to stop her, but to acknowledge her. Excuse me, he said softly, his voice lowered so only she could hear. Could I speak to you a moment? She paused. Kesha looked at him, reading him the way she'd once been trained to read foreign eyes, checking posture, tone, hands, threat assessment. "You a cop?" she asked bluntly. James smiled faintly. "No, ma'am, but I did recognize something on your arm." Her expression didn't change, but she blinked once slowly, a flash of realization. She stepped a little closer, voice low. "What did you see?" "The tattoo, faded, 1st Infantry." She didn't respond right away. Her eyes stayed on him, heavy with thought. "Marines?" she asked. "2 tour Afghanistan," he nodded. "You?" She exhaled, a sound that carried more weight than words. "3 tour Iraq. Combat trauma specialist." James's gaze softened. "That explains the calm." She gave a half smile. "We were taught to keep breathing while everything around us stopped." James nodded slowly. "I knew you weren't just any waitress." Kesha shook her head gently. "You'd be surprised how many people don't want to know the truth. Easier to mock the surface than ask what's underneath." She looked past him, toward the table in the corner. "Men like that, they don't care who you are, just what they think you are." James leaned forward slightly. "So why let them treat you like that?" Kesha's lips tightened. "Because sometimes silence lets you see more." James followed her gaze back toward Davidson, who was now showing something on his phone to Brett, laughing. "I've been watching them," Kesha continued. 6 months now, every Tuesday. They come here, they brag about their business deals, joke about firing people who look like me, talk about cleaning house with fake performance reviews. They think I'm background noise." James's eyes sharpened. "You've been documenting." She nodded slowly. "Names, clients, deals, the way they bend the law, they treat this place like a private club. They say things no one should say out loud, especially not with a veteran 2 tables away. I started recording them a while ago. Texas is a one-party consent state." James looked down at his coffee, then back at her. "Smart. It's not about revenge," Kesha said. "It's about accountability. They walk through this world like they own it, like they'll never answer to anyone. But sometimes, all it takes is one person they never saw coming." James tilted his head. "You planning to take it public?" "When the time's right," she said. "Not before." She looked back down at her arm, where the tattoo lay hidden again. "You know, I used to wear that like a badge. The day they pinned that combat medal on me, I thought it would mean something back home. Thought maybe people would see me as more than just a black woman with scars." James's voice was warm, low. "You shouldn't have to prove your worth." Kesha met his eyes. "But we do every single day." And suddenly, they were both there again. Not in the diner, but in that in-between space veterans carry with them. The desert, the sirens, the blood, the impossible calm when everything inside you is breaking, but the mission says keep going. Kesha's eyes drifted to the kitchen. Dante gave her a short nod. Maria mouthed a single word, "You good." She gave them a slight smile in return, just enough to say, "I'm holding." James stood and reached for his wallet, pulling out a 20 for the coffee he barely touched. "Listen," he said, "if you need someone to back you up when the time comes, if this turns into something public, I got you." "I appreciate that," she said quietly. "Not doing it out of pity," he added. "Doing it because what you're doing takes more guts than most people have in a lifetime." Kesha hesitated, then leaned in just slightly. "They think they're the ones holding the knife, but I've been sharpening mine in silence." Her voice was steady, her eyes like iron. James watched her walk away, the tray balanced in her hands, the scars on her arms catching a flicker of light. Not flaws, not shame, symbols of survival. Outside the diner window, a storm was building on the horizon. Dark clouds rolling in slow, heavy with something inevitable. Inside, Kesha took another table's order, her voice calm, her expression soft, like nothing had happened. But James knew the truth now. She wasn't serving coffee, she was preparing for war. Racist CEO starts filming Waitress to humiliate her. She lets him. The diner's air hung heavy with tension. Not loud, not angry, just that humming static before a lightning strike. Outside, gray clouds crowded the sky, pressing in against the windows like watchers waiting for a scene to unfold. Davidson had just finished his steak sandwich, wiped his mouth with the kind of entitlement that came from decades of unchecked power, and glanced toward Kesha with a smirk that didn't belong in any room that served decent food. "You know what?" he said, pushing back his chair and pulling out his phone. "Let us have some fun." Brett chuckled. "Careful, man, you're gonna get canceled." Davidson ignored him. He stood and angled the phone toward Kesha, who was wiping down the booth next to them. "Hey, everyone," he said, loud and clear for the entire diner to hear. "I want y'all to meet Monster. She serves us coffee here at Ray's. Check out that burned face." Gasps rippled softly from the booths nearby. A mother at the far end of the room pulled her daughter closer. Even Dante paused, the spatula in his hand frozen mid-flip. Kesha turned, slow, graceful. She didn't flinch, she didn't yell, she didn't even raise an eyebrow. Instead, she looked directly into the lens and smiled. But it wasn't warm, it was cold, silent, a battlefield smile, the kind that doesn't need sound to cut skin. James felt it in his chest, the shift. He'd seen it before, back when a convoy had been ambushed in the Korengal Valley. That moment right before the medic took command, before calm turned into strategy. "Keep recording," she said, voice steady. "You'll want to save this one for later." Davidson laughed like a man who thought he was winning. "Oh, look at that," he said, panning the phone across her. "She loves the attention. Bet she's used to being filmed. You probably got one of those OnlyFans pages, huh? Maybe for people into scars." James clenched his jaw, but he didn't move. He needed to see how she handled this. There was a reason she hadn't snapped, not yet. Kesha walked slowly to the table, each step deliberate. "You're right," she said calmly. "I've had a lot of experience in front of cameras." Davidson grinned wide. "Oh yeah, tell us more." She tilted her head as if thinking. "Well, I've been filmed receiving military medals for pulling soldiers out from under live fire. I've been filmed performing emergency surgery in a Humvee with nothing but gauze, adrenaline, and prayer. Oh, and there's footage of me holding a child who had just lost her entire family to a roadside bomb. That one made it into a documentary." The grin on Davidson's face faltered. A few heads turned. Someone in a booth whispered, "Wait, military." James watched it click in real time. This wasn't a performance. This was her opening move. Davidson barked a laugh, but it came out too sharp, too forced. "Sure, and I'm General Washington," he scoffed. But eyes were turning now. Customers weren't laughing. Some were staring, some were filming. Kesha stepped a little closer. "What's your name again?" she asked, still calm. "Davidson Mitchell." "Mitchell and Associates," he replied proudly. "You can Google me." "I will," she said. "And your friends, what are their names?" "Why," Davidson raised a brow. "So when this goes viral, people can match the faces to the words." Brett suddenly shifted in his seat. Davidson narrowed his eyes. "What is this? Some intimidation thing?" "No," she answered. "Just making sure the story is told right." She turned toward the counter. "Tony," she called to the manager. "Could you come over, please?" Tony approached cautiously, wiping his hands on a towel. "Kesha, what's going on?" "I just want you to witness," she said. "That Mr. Davidson Mitchell here is filming me without consent and making comments about my appearance, racial and physical. And that he stated his full name and company voluntarily on video." Tony blinked, confused. Okay, noted." She turned to James. "Thank you again, we'll talk more later." Davidson, now flustered, lowered his phone slightly. "You really think anyone cares about some waitress crying about being teased?" Kesha's eyes sharpened. "I'm not crying, I'm documenting." James whispered under his breath, "And there it is." Davidson scoffed. "You act like you're some kind of threat." Kesha took a breath, calm as still water. "You've been coming here for months," she said, "and every week you talk business out loud. You mock women, mock black employees, describe how you fire people who do fit the image. Your words. You can't prove any of that," he said, voice tightening. "I've been recording you for 6 months," she said, matter of fact. "Every Tuesday, every word." The diner went still. Davidson stared at her. "That's illegal." "In Texas," she replied, "one-party consent, and I've been the party." He stepped forward, voice rising. "You delete it right now, or I swear." James stood up. "I wouldn't do that," he said. Davidson turned. "Who even are you?" "Someone who served," James answered. "Someone who recognized the tattoo you didn't." Davidson's phone rang. He glanced down. It was his wife. He ignored it. "You're bluffing," he said to Kesha. "You sure?" she asked. "Because I've already sent copies to civil rights attorneys, equal employment, and a few local newsrooms who love stories about powerful men saying things they shouldn't." Davidson looked pale. "You don't have anything." She pulled her phone from her apron, clicked on a file. His voice echoed out loud. "The trick is to create documentation after the fact. That way they can't prove discrimination." A few heads snapped toward them. "No names," Davidson said quickly. "That could be anyone." Another file. "I told Stevens we can fire her for cultural misfit. Don't say race, just say lack of alignment. That's the game." Brett looked like he'd swallowed glass. Davidson's phone buzzed again. Kesha raised an eyebrow. "Maybe check your notifications." He picked it up. His hands shook as he opened Instagram. The video was already posted. Title: CEO of Mitchell and Associates Films decorated war veteran with burn scars. View count: 42,000 and rising. Davidson stared at it like it was a death sentence. James nodded toward Kesha. "You didn't survive war just to be quiet here, did you?" Kesha didn't smile. "No. I survived war to remind men like him that some people don't fight with fists. They fight with truth." And now truth was going viral. Waitress drops bombshell. She secretly recorded her boss for months. Davidson was still holding his phone, but the confidence that once gleamed in his voice had drained into something tighter, more desperate. He looked around the diner, suddenly aware of just how many eyes were on him. The laughter was gone. The smirks were gone. Now people were watching, and Kesha wasn't done. She turned toward the kitchen. "Tony," she called again, calm as ever. The manager appeared, hesitant, wiping his hands on a dish towel. He looked at Davidson, then at Kesha. "I just need you to witness something," she said. "I want it to be clear that Mr. Davidson Mitchell, CEO of Mitchell and Associates, is filming me without my permission, making derogatory comments about my appearance, and has publicly stated his full name and company in this establishment." Tony blinked. Yeah, I heard that." "You heard it?" Kesha asked again, making sure the words hung heavy. "I did." Davidson forced a dry laugh. "You people are unbelievable." Kesha stepped forward. Her tone never changed. She didn't yell. She didn't need to. "We've had this conversation before, Mr. Mitchell. You just didn't know it." Davidson rolled his eyes. "What, you think some sob story about your scars is going to hurt me?" "No," she replied. "But your own words will." She pulled her phone out from her apron, tapped the screen, and held it up. A voice filled the diner. Davidson's voice, crisp, unmistakable, soaked in arrogance. The secret is never to put it on paper. You fire them for attitude, cultural mismatch, lateness, anything but race. Gasps echoed from one of the booths. Someone dropped a fork. Davidson's face went stiff. "That could be edited," he said quickly. "That's not." Kesha tapped again. Another clip played. "We cleaned house last year. HR didn't ask questions. Black girl kept showing up in head wraps. Didn't fit the image. Boom, gone." His words sounded colder through the speaker, like they came from a man who had forgotten the world listens now. Davidson lunged forward. "Give me the phone." James stepped in front of him. "You touch her, and this turns from public humiliation to assault." Davidson hesitated, then stepped back. His jaw tightened. Kesha raised her voice just enough for everyone to hear. "For the record, every Tuesday for 6 months, Mr. Davidson Mitchell has sat at this table, shared names, detailed client strategies, and spoken openly about discriminatory practices. I've recorded them all." Brett stammered, "She's bluffing, she doesn't have." Kesha tapped again. Brett's own voice came through the phone. "You've got to time it right. Let them go when performance looks weak on paper. Nobody argues when the numbers say it." Dante leaned against the kitchen wall, arms crossed. Maria stopped chopping. Customers began filming. Davidson's phone rang. Again. He answered this time, eyes darting nervously. "Davidson," the voice barked through the line, loud enough for nearby booths to hear. "It's Michael Stevens. We need to talk now." Kesha watched him freeze. "You mentioned Stevens in one of those clips," she said gently. "Something about how you helped him let go of 6 black employees without triggering legal red flags." Davidson's voice shook. "How did you?" "I was there," Kesha said. "Right over there, refilling your water." Tony cleared his throat, trying to de-escalate. "Kesha, maybe we should talk about this in the back." "No," she said. "He made it public. Let's keep it public." Davidson tried to put his phone away. "Don't," she said. "You're going to want to keep that handy." And right on cue, it rang again. Another client, then another. Each ring felt heavier. James leaned close. "You think he's starting to realize how deep the hole is?" "He doesn't know the half of it," Kesha said. Davidson turned to her, voice cracking with panic. "You don't get it. You don't understand what this will do." She stepped closer. "You're right. I don't know what this will do to your business or your reputation, but I know what it's already done to people like me. I've watched you laugh while talking about destroying careers, black careers, like it was strategy. I've watched you reduce people to quotas, and you thought I didn't matter." Davidson sat down, suddenly smaller in his chair. Kesha looked around the diner. Customers were whispering, murmuring, phones recording. She raised hers one more time. "This is just a sample. There's a full archive, already backed up, already sent out." Davidson's face turned pale. James folded his arms. "Looks like your Tuesday lunches just got canceled." Kesha tilted her head. "Tell your clients. Tell your investors. Tell your wife." As if summoned by name, his phone rang again. He picked it up with shaking hands. "Davidson," a voice said, cold and sharp. "What the hell did you just post? My daughter sent me a video. You're on Instagram humiliating a combat veteran. Do you know how this looks?" Davidson glanced at Kesha, his voice trembling. I didn't know who she was." Kesha stepped forward, looking him in the eye. "And that's the point." She slipped her phone back into her apron. "You never asked, you never cared." And finally the silence settled in. The kind that comes after a storm but before the damage is truly counted. But Kesha wasn't finished. Not yet. Viral video exposes CEO mocking veteran. Fallout spreads like wildfire. By the next morning, the video had already passed 800,000 views. It was everywhere. Instagram Reels, TikTok compilations, reaction videos on YouTube. The title was simple but explosive. CEO humiliates burned survivor, then learns she's a war hero. Underneath it, the comment section was a wildfire of justice. She's a goddess in scars, he's a coward in a suit. Imagine mocking the hands that carried bleeding soldiers. America owes her more than just coffee tips. Davidson Mitchell, remember the name for all the wrong reasons. Someone dug into his past within hours. Screenshots of Mitchell and Associates' company profile were plastered all over Twitter. Posts flooded LinkedIn. Clients began issuing statements to distance themselves from him. One of them read, "We do not condone any form of discrimination. Effective immediately, we are terminating all contracts with Mitchell and Associates." Davidson's name was trending, not because of power, but because power had finally met accountability. Back in his high-rise condo, Davidson stood frozen in his living room. The large windows overlooked the skyline, but the sun couldn't warm the chill in his chest. His phone rang over and over, clients, lawyers, reporters. Then it rang again. He didn't even check the screen. "Hello." It was her voice, cold, shaking. "I saw the video," his wife said. "My sister sent it to me," she cried. He rubbed his forehead. "Listen, just give me a chance to explain." "No, we've been married 10 years, Davidson, and I never knew what you were capable of. You didn't just embarrass yourself. You humiliated a veteran, a black woman. On camera." "I didn't know," he started. "That's not an excuse, you didn't care." The line went dead. She was gone, just like the clients, just like the facade. The next day, the company's board met without him. One by one, they began filing legal motions. By the end of the week, Davidson Mitchell had resigned as CEO. He didn't walk out of the building. He snuck out through the underground parking lot. And across town, Brett was feeling the heat, too. The State Board of Financial Conduct had opened an inquiry into his license. Someone had uploaded a direct clip of him speaking. The trick is to create retroactive documentation, so they can't prove anything. The video was spliced with side-by-side images of companies that had recently fired black employees. Brett's name appeared in the captions. An online petition called for his removal from the professional register. It gained 50,000 signatures in 2 days. His inbox was flooded with rejection letters. His phone stopped ringing. And the people who used to greet him in his favorite cafe now whispered behind their hands. He started using cash, avoided eye contact, changed grocery stores, but shame has a way of sticking. One afternoon, Brett was standing in the detergent aisle of a quiet supermarket when he heard it, a young boy tugging on his mother's hand. "Mom, look, that's the man from the video." Brett turned away, his face hot, heart pounding. He left the store without buying anything. Meanwhile, back at Ray's diner, the energy was completely different. Customers were showing up not to eat, but to thank her. The bell above the door jingled with a different rhythm now. Veterans came in uniform. Women brought flowers. Someone left a note that read, "Your scars speak louder than their words ever will." Tony, the manager, couldn't keep up with the phone. "You've got a podcast requesting an interview," he told her one morning. "And 2 morning shows, they want to fly you out." Kesha just smiled and kept refilling cups. "I'm not chasing a spotlight," she said. James chuckled from his booth. "Seems like it's chasing you." One evening, Kesha sat down at a small table near the window. The light outside was golden, soft. She looked at her hands, the scarred skin, the tired fingers. James joined her. "Funny," she said. "I spent years hiding these. Now people call them brave." "They are," James replied. "No," she said. What's brave is not burning the whole system down, just proving it can't burn you. A moment passed. He reached across and placed a folder on the table. What's this? Letters, he said. From people like you, vets, survivors, people you inspired. She opened it slowly. One was from a girl who had been fired after reporting racial harassment. Another from a young black man who had been told he was too urban for the boardroom. And another from the mother of a soldier who never made it home. Kesha blinked. I didn't ask for any of this, she whispered. No, James said, but you earned it. She looked outside, watching as a woman walked by holding a child's hand. They paused at the window, waved. Kesha waved back. The scars on her hand caught the last light of the day. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't pull her sleeve down. Black veteran testifies before Congress. Scars now speak for many. A single spotlight lit the podium. The chamber was quiet, save for the hum of distant air vents and the soft shuffling of papers. Rows of suited officials looked up, most of them prepared for another standard testimony. But when Kesha Johnson stepped forward, silence thickened like rain clouds about to break. She wore no medals, no dramatic uniform. Just a plain black blazer, her hair pulled back, her scars uncovered. They ran along her hands like rivers carved by fire, silent proof of a history no one could ignore. My name is Kesha Johnson, she began, voice calm, firm. I served 3 tours as a combat trauma specialist in Iraq. I was responsible for saving lives under mortar fire, sometimes with one hand pressed to a bleeding chest and the other holding a radio to call for dust-off. A pause. I returned home thinking I'd be respected. Instead, I was mocked, ridiculed for my appearance, ignored because of my skin. And it didn't happen in a dark alley. It happened under bright lights in a public place while I poured coffee. James sat in the audience, back straight, eyes focused. He knew every word she spoke carried the weight of 1,000 unheard voices. She wasn't just talking for herself. She was speaking for every veteran who came home only to be forgotten, especially the black ones. The man who filmed me, Kesha continued, thought he was humiliating someone beneath him. But what he did was reveal the rot that still lives in our institutions. That rot isn't just about race. It's about what we choose to see, who we choose to hear. A few members of Congress shifted, visibly moved. Respect, she said, pausing to let the words sit in the room, should never depend on your title, your paycheck, or how smooth your skin looks under fluorescent lights. It should be basic, human, automatic. Cameras flashed quietly. Phones recorded. But Kesha didn't flinch. When she stepped down from the podium, she didn't look for applause. She looked at the veterans seated behind her, nodding quietly. She had done what many had never had the chance to do, speak without being silenced. Later that night, back at Ray's diner, the photo from that moment, Kesha standing beneath the U.S. flag, scars visible, eyes full of fire, had already gone viral again. Maria taped it beside the counter, next to the growing wall of letters and photos sent in by veterans from every corner of the country. We should just rename this place, she said. Call it something like The Wall. Dante grinned, sliding a plate of biscuits down the pass window. Call it Kesha's. The doorbell jingled. Another group of veterans walked in, heads nodding, eyes scanning the wall like it was sacred ground. They had driven 5 hours to see her, not for autographs, not for photos, just to say thank you. I didn't even know who you were at first, one of them said, taking off his cap. But I recognized the look in your eyes, that calm, that fight. Kesha smiled gently. We don't lose that, we just learn where to aim it. Across town, James's new office was finally open. A small sign hung above the door. Steel roots. veteran transition and justice services. Inside was a simple setup, 2 desks, a stack of resource pamphlets, and a large corkboard filled with pinned resumes and handwritten goals from former service members trying to find civilian jobs. The desk in the corner had a nameplate, Kesha Johnson, advisor. She hadn't planned to join officially, but after what happened, it didn't feel right to walk away from what had just begun. "This is where the real war starts," James told her, walking her through the intake system, helping them cross the line between survival and dignity. Kesha nodded. "We spent years teaching each other how to stay alive. Now we teach each other how to live." They organized workshops, job placement partnerships, and weekly meetups at the diner, which had become a safe haven, part sanctuary, part strategy hub. The walls carried more than orders now. They carried legacy. Every week, new stories were shared, and every week, someone new would say the same thing. "You gave us language." They weren't talking about fancy speeches. They meant her scars, her poise, her refusal to let mockery dictate her worth. One night, while locking up the diner, Tony turned to her. "You know, this place used to be just a restaurant." She looked around at the warm lights, the letters, the photos, the silence that now carried pride instead of shame. "Now it's a witness," she said. Outside, a soft breeze moved through the night. James leaned against the doorframe of steel roots across the street, watching her with a quiet smile. And for the first time, Kesha allowed herself a moment of rest, not because the fight was over, but because she had finally turned the pain they gave her into something that couldn't be mocked, truth. And truth, when spoken with scars, carries fire. Fallen CEO returns to diner in shame. Black waitress says one final line. The bell above the diner door rang quietly, not like the usual midday chaos, but soft, almost unsure of itself. The lunchtime crowd had thinned, and the afternoon sun streamed through the dusty windows, painting golden lines across the tile floor. Kesha was wiping down the counter when she looked up and saw him. Davidson. But not the man who once mocked her with a camera in hand and arrogance dripping from every word. This man was smaller, shoulders slouched, eyes tired. His expensive suit was replaced with a wrinkled jacket. The wrist that used to flash a gold watch now hung bare. Even the shoes, once polished leather, looked scuffed like they'd walked through weeks of regret. He didn't approach the usual booth. Instead, he stood by the entrance, hesitating. Kesha calmly placed the towel down. Their eyes met. He took a step forward. "Hi," he said, voice dry, weak. Is it okay if I sit?" She didn't answer right away. Then she nodded toward the end of the counter. "One of those seats is always open." He slid onto the stool as if expecting to be thrown out at any moment. Around the diner, regulars noticed, some whispering, some glaring, but no one interrupted. Not yet. Kesha walked over slowly, not cold, not angry, just still. She placed a coffee cup in front of him, poured it, black, no sugar, just the way he always ordered it. He looked down into the steam for a long time before speaking. "I've lost a lot." She didn't respond. "My wife left, took the kids, clients pulled everything. The company's gone, I'm facing possible charges. And every time I walk into a store, someone recognizes me." His voice cracked. "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I needed to see you, to say." He looked up at her, eyes glassy. "I didn't know who you were." Kesha leaned slightly forward. "And that," she said quietly, "was never the problem." He blinked. "It wasn't a misunderstanding," she continued. "It was a revelation of character, yours and mine." The words hung in the air like incense in a sanctuary. Sharp, sacred. Davidson swallowed hard, shame rolling off him like sweat. "I thought I was better than you," he said. "I thought I could joke, degrade, and still walk away clean." Kesha tilted her head. You were never clean, you just hadn't been exposed. He nodded slowly. I deserved everything that came. She didn't deny it, she simply refilled his cup. You asked to be seen, she said. Well, now the world sees you, the same way they now see me. He gripped the coffee cup like it was holding him together. I don't know how to rebuild. You don't, she said plainly. You learn and you stay quiet while others finally speak. Silence settled between them, but it wasn't empty. It was full of truth. After a moment, Davidson reached into his coat pocket and slid something across the counter. It was a small, folded photograph. Kesha opened it. It was his daughter, maybe 9, smiling, holding a sign that said, "Thank you for your service." She saw your video, he said. She asked me why I laughed at someone who saved lives. I didn't know what to tell her. Kesha looked at the girl's eyes in the photo, then back at the man across from her. You tell her the truth, she said. You tell her you were wrong. Davidson nodded, stood slowly, and reached for his wallet. No need, Kesha said softly. The debt's already been paid. He paused, hand in midair. Then quietly he put the money away, gave a slight nod, and walked out the door. No fanfare, no redemption speech, just silence. Kesha watched the door close behind him. For a moment she stood still. Then she turned to the window. Outside, the sky was soft with light. A young black girl walked past holding her father's hand. They stopped to look inside, eyes catching the framed photo of Kesha in uniform placed just beside the register. The girl pointed at it. The father nodded proudly. Inside, Kesha touched her forearm, where the scar met the edge of her tattoo. Once it had been something she hid. Now it was sacred, not because it told people what she had survived, but because it reminded them what she had become. In the end, Kesha's story reminds us that true strength doesn't shout. It stands tall in silence, even when the world tries to look the other way. Her scars, once mocked, became symbols of dignity, proof that survival is not just about enduring pain, but about transforming it into purpose. We are reminded that every person we overlook may be carrying a story that could change everything. A story of service, sacrifice, and resilience. Respect should never depend on titles, appearances, or skin color. It should be given freely, because dignity is a human right. If this story moved you, if it stirred something quiet in your heart, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Black Unbreakable, and share your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear your voice. And don't go far, because in the next videos, we'll continue to uncover the untold stories of Black men and women who rose above injustice, who turned pain into power, and who proved to the world that being unseen doesn't mean being unworthy. These are the stories that will inspire you, surprise you, and stay with you long after the screen fades to black.